Hey, hello everybody. Thanks for joining and thanks for watching. Today I want to talk about the term masterpiece. That is a term that I use, that I seem to use very often, but in reality I don't. And I want to talk about what a masterpiece means to me, what the term itself means to me, and specifically when I'm talking about JRPGs. You've probably seen me talking about or mentioning that word, saying that term over and over again. Usually it is a term that I use to refer to some JRPGs in my top 10s or in some reviews. I said this game is a masterpiece, you should definitely play it. What a masterpiece, amazing masterpiece, underrated masterpiece, overrated masterpiece. I usually use that term. And it just seems that I use that term a lot, but in reality I don't. So today I want to talk about what the term means to me and trying to make you guys understand what is, we're pretty much understanding a masterpiece, a JRPG masterpiece, in my opinion. And I want to show to you guys that I don't use the term as often as you may think. And well, I'll prove that first. If anybody has ever watched my tier list videos, you will notice that there's the tier list says S. The ranks are S, A, B, C, D, F, blah blah blah, right? So the S tier, which is the highest on the list, is usually the one that I leave for masterpieces. Everything that goes on the S tier on the tier list videos is a masterpiece in my opinion. Okay, but in reality, so if you think that I use the term very often, just go and watch some of those videos and you'll notice that most of those videos, most of those tier lists, they only have like 2 or 4 games in there. So that means, that there's a lot of games that I don't think of them as masterpieces, only a select few. I like to think of myself as a selective man. I'm pretty selective, I'm pretty picky. Picky is the right term. Very picky, for this. But the truth is that I use the term, and I may seem to overuse it, but I don't. It's just that usually when I call a game a masterpiece is because I think of the game as a masterpiece. And there's only like one game. Usually when you watch my videos, my top 10, there's usually like 1 or 2 games that are masterpieces in my opinion. So alright, so we're going to start this video by showing some gameplay footage of some of the games that I consider a masterpiece. But first, I'd like to read what the definition of the masterpiece is according to Wikipedia, and obviously according to our own. The term itself has an objective definition, okay? And we, not just me, most of you, we may be using it wrongly, incorrectly, okay? Because I have here Wikipedia. If you don't believe me, go and Google it yourself. Masterpiece, magnus opus in Latin, in modern use, is a creation that has been given much critical praise, especially one that is considered the greatest work of a person's career, or a work of outstanding creativity, skill, profundity, and workmanship. Okay, so it's giving us 3 examples in there. Historically, a masterpiece was a work of a very high standard produced to obtain membership of a guild or academy in various areas of the visual arts and crafts. This is usually when, back in the old day, several centuries ago, there was just painting and music. So, let me read that again. Masterpiece, in modern use, is a creation that has been given much critical praise. So, I don't know, a game like Chrono Trigger is a JRPG that has been given much critical praise. So, that's, according to Wikipedia, a masterpiece. But it also says, especially one that is considered the greatest work of a person's career, which means, is Chrono Trigger the best work of Hironobu Sakaguchi? Is Chrono Trigger the best work of Yuji Horii? Maybe it is, I don't know, maybe in your opinion it is, but what is that person's greatest work in their entire career? But the one definition that I like the most, and that's the one that I usually use for my own personal definition, is a work of outstanding creativity, skill, profundity, and workmanship. So, okay. So let me tell you what exactly, in my own words, because I agree with that statement. Let me tell you what a masterpiece means, in my opinion. Let me show you the most obvious gameplay footage of the biggest masterpiece of my life. That my favorite game of all time. So here we go. So you don't have to see my damn face. So here's the remaster of Chrono Cross. Let me just
face up to reality too.
All right, so here,
I want you to go.
Chrono Cross is a masterpiece.
Get some scales for me.
That's a masterpiece.
Lena is a decent party member.
So I'll explain why a masterpiece means
quickly,
to me.
Unless you're playing on New Game Plus.
I agree with that statement.
When you're over leveled,
but
she's a total
the thing
badass.
Is that
but Lena is not one.
When it comes to judging video games, we are going to judge several things. If we're going to judge a book,
easily replaceable.
We're only going to focus on the story, maybe the characters, the writing, a few things, right? But in video games, there's all of these different arts combined. There's visual stuff.
You know what's funny about
writing,
the Radical
there's
Dreamers
programming
edition?
and designing,
the Radical Dreamers text adventure,
So what is a masterpiece to me?
It came out before this game,
opinion,
and a lot of Japanese
to me,
people played it before. But I suggest you play Chrono Cross first, and then Radical Dreamers.
In terms of video games, in terms of JRPGs, it's a JRPG that did everything right.
And
every single aspect,
trip already.
Music,
I mean, when I was
graphics,
playing Radical Dreamers
art
this morning,
style,
I was, man,
gameplay, battle system.
I was a target audience.
What else do you want to add? Right, the story.
The game was made for me.
Characters.
That's
that's
the
when I
most
think
selfish
of
thing I've said my whole
a
life.
masterpiece. When all of these 7 things together are great. Some of you may add, I don't know, the pacing or the presentation.
Let's do that.
But I think the presentation of a game may not be the best, one of the best characteristics to judge a game, especially if we're talking about a game.
What do we have? Do we have some elements?
It's kind of slow at the beginning.
Allocated.
And Chrono Cross being showcased right now is not a slow game at the beginning, not in my opinion. There are several examples of slow games. We'll get to those, some of those later. I want to talk about Suikoden V, which in my opinion is well, pretty much a slow game. So, and I may not have the best definition of the term presentation, because I'm not sure. I want you guys in the chat. I want you guys to tell me, what exactly presentation means to you. So, okay. Let's show something else about Chrono Cross. There, where key appears. All right, so I mentioned 7 things. These 7 things need to be like, well, there isn't something called perfect. I don't believe in something called perfect. I've used that term before, but it's just to hype things up, to over-define something, But I don't believe nothing's perfect. But if these 7 things that I mentioned are excellent, then we're talking about a masterpiece. There are games where the gameplay is phenomenal. The gameplay, the characters or the story, and that's it. The music is kind of like forgettable, or the graphics are mediocre, or the gameplay is phenomenal, but the music is, or the characters are kind of meh. I made a couple of videos a long time ago called top 10 JRPGs with great gameplay but bad story, or great story and bad gameplay. So none of those games are what I will call a masterpiece. Like I said, a masterpiece to me is something that did everything right. Taking Chrono Cross as an example, I think the story is, wow, like mind-blowing. It's excellent. The characters are excellent in my opinion. I know some of you were complaining about there's too many characters that kind of irrelevant, and I respect that, but most of the characters feel relevant to me, at least relevant in terms of their own part of the story, their own part in the plot. So the characters are phenomenal. The music in this game is objectively phenomenal. It's not a matter of opinion. It is like the term itself meant, in Wikipedia, something that has been critically praised, and that's the music in Chrono Cross. So even if you hate this game all you want, you can't change the fact that the music has been critically praised. So the music, and then the graphics and the art style for its time were phenomenal, And if you go back and play the original PS1 version, well, you can't go back in time, but for those of you who played Chrono Cross around the era, around its first years when it came out, you may have noticed that the graphics were amazing. But this is Squaresoft we're talking about, so there's a lot of money in there. So not every amazing or masterpiece game can have the luxury of having phenomenal graphics. But the art style in Chrono Cross is beautiful. The backgrounds, how most of the world seems hand-drawn, and it's just beautiful. So it's a beautifully looking game. And what else did I mention? The art style. Oh, the battle system. The battle system is something that I really enjoy. I greatly enjoy the battle system in Chrono Cross. It may not be everyone's cup of tea. And I know the battle theme in Chrono Cross is not one of the best battle themes ever. But it's great. It's I love the battle system here. So I think it's excellent. And the gameplay itself, going from place to place, no random encounters. Sometimes it's hard to avoid the enemies, but most of the time it isn't. No random encounters, so it's just there. Right, the flow of the gameplay feels great. The menus, the interface. Sure, when you get into a battle, not in the remaster, in the original version, when you get into a battle, it kind of, it takes a little bit of loading time. But we're talking about the PlayStation era, for Christ's sake. Most games were like that. So nowadays it's inexcusable. I know, but back then it was totally excusable. It wasn't that long. So, in conclusion, Chrono Cross, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. So, let's use another example if you want to. Let's talk about okay, but before we get to my next game, I want to ask you guys what presentation means to me. Or, I know what pacing means. Pacing means that the game hooks you. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you have a different definition, let me know in the chat right now. This is why I wanted to do this video live, because I have a lot to say about this topic. And I want to read you guys' opinions. So pacing to me is when the game hooks you right from the start, and the difficulty, both the storytelling, the narrative, and the difficulty are just right. The game isn't too easy, the game isn't too hard. Difficulty is just, or it's one of those games that it gets more difficult the more you advance, but it doesn't hit you with nasty difficulty spikes, especially not during the first 5 or 6 hours, right? And in terms of narrative, it's a game that keeps you entertained. That little by little, it starts reeling you in, hooking you up, until halfway through the game, you're already like, wow, this is great. So that's pacing. That's what pacing means to me. Because, I mentioned 7 things once again. I mentioned 7 things, guys, and I didn't mention pacing and presentation because there seems to be a lot of confusion of what those terms mean. Just like graphics and art style, I feel like most people don't understand the difference between graphics and art style. It may seem like the same, but how many times have you seen, how many times have you seen, a game that doesn't perform very well, but it looks beautiful? I think when people talk about graphics, they also need to mention the resolution, or the how great it looks on your TV or on whatever screen you're playing the game. So you may have a game that has poor resolution, or Ys 8 is one of those games. Well, I'm going to show Ys 8 in a bit. In fact, let me show Ys 8 right now. All right. So, here we go. Let me mute it first. So let me go full screen with this little gameplay that I captured a long time ago. This is in 1080p. Ys 8, I want to clarify first that it is a beautifully looking game. It's beautiful. The art style, the character design, the world itself is gorgeous. But Ys 8, it struggles. Even on the PS4, it struggles a little bit with the resolution. So are the graphics in Ys 8, another game that I consider a masterpiece, are the graphics in this game a masterpiece or excellent? Well, they are to me, because I don't really care that much about frame rate and resolution, to be honest. Frame rate is the key word in this graphics discussion. I don't really care that much about that. For example, several Switch games are excellent. There's Xenogears Chronicles Definitive Edition, there's Shin Megami Tensei 5, Octopath Traveler, games that I consider like S tiers, like masterpieces, but they don't have the best frame rate because the Switch itself does not have the best frame rate, obviously. So that's what I want to use as an example, a game like this. Graphics don't matter that much to me. I pay more attention to the art style, to the character design, to all of those stuff. Sure, when it comes to battle, you're seeing a battle right now. When it comes to battle, when it comes to fighting, you can see right now it drops a little bit. This is the highest resolution that I could record, with my capture device, and the Ys games are known for being like this. They struggle a little bit when you are running around, or when you're fighting, you know. But, you know, does it really matter that much? If it matters to you, then, you know, I think Ys 8, a game that is a masterpiece to me, may not be a masterpiece to you. That's what I was talking about. So now that you've seen it, you know, let me put it back to normal. So my point is that, going back to the pacing and presentation thing, you know, I think pacing is important, and it may be able to determine whether an RPG is a masterpiece or not. I've played several games in my life that are, you know, the pacing is not that great, but they're still excellent games. I mean, I say the pacing is not that great because you hit a difficulty spike in like the first 3 hours. Or, you know, the first hour of the game, the story, the narrative is like, wow, you know, I'm totally hooked. I'll show an example of that in a bit. And then it goes kind of boring for a while. 1 hour later, you know, on the third hour, you're like, is this game gonna get good at some time? On your fourth hour, you're the same. Fifth hour, and maybe by then you've already quit the game because the pacing was not great for you. But some games are totally worth, you know, even if they're slow at the beginning. I think Star Ocean, the second story, it's not the game I want to showcase, but Star Ocean, the second story, I think it's a game that doesn't hook you right from the start. It's interesting that you start with Claude and his father, the guy from the first Star Ocean, Ronixis, I think the name was, and well, you get transported into this underdeveloped planet. Claude, the protagonist, does, and he saves Rena, whatever. And then you spend a lot of time in town. You know, Rena's making up her mind if she's going to go out or she's going to do whatever. You know, it's a slow game. If you think Star Ocean, the second story, starts and hooks you up from the start, good. You know, I respect that. It just didn't for me. It didn't hook me up until much later, until like 3 hours in. But the first 2 hours of Star Ocean, the second story, were boring as hell to me. And you want to know what other game was like that? I'll show you. It's a game that most of you can't play because it's overly expensive. Here we go. That is Suikoden 5. Suikoden 5, guys. Okay, Suikoden 5 is a game that I know you're gonna throw this at me that you can't play, but you know, there's emulation. If you don't want to emulate a $250 game, because emulating a game that expensive is justifiable, a game that is exclusive on PS2 and you can't play that game anywhere else, well, I'm sorry, but that's your problem. You know, you can't play the game because you don't want to play the game. Nowadays, PS2 is kind of easy to emulate. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that Suikoden 5 is a game that I've called a masterpiece before. Okay? So, games like Chrono Cross, Ys 8, according to Wikipedia, you know, these are games that have been critically praised. What they said, right? Are they the best work of their authors? Well, in Chrono Cross, in Ys 8, it is. I think Ys 8 is the best thing Falcom, the creator, the author, has done. Right? In Chrono Cross is Masato Kato, who's the director and the writer, who pretty much was the brainchild of that game, you know. Chrono Cross, in my opinion, is the best thing he's ever done. And don't throw Xenogears at me. I know Masato Kato wrote part of the story, but that was mainly Tetsuya Takahashi and his wife. So Chrono Cross is, in all three definitions of the term masterpiece according to Wikipedia, a masterpiece. But what about a game like Suikoden 5? A game, I know there's Suikoden 2, everybody calls Suikoden 2 a masterpiece. It has been critically praised. People think it's the best Suikoden, so it's the author's greatest work. But Suikoden 5 is also the best of the authors. You know, Suikoden 5 was not done by the same guys who did Suikoden 1 and 2 and 3. This was a different team of people. So by this team of people, you know, this is their greatest work in my opinion. But anyway, you know, I was talking about the presentation and the whatnot. So, first and foremost, I think Suikoden 2, if we're gonna judge Suikoden 5, by its pacing, it may be a game that, well, it may not be a masterpiece to you because it's kind of slow. It gets really good, but how good it gets, it's up to you. I think it's a game that it takes a while. Usually when you're like 5 or 6 hours in, it finally sinks in, it finally traps you. There's something really horrible that happens in the game. I'm not gonna spoil it. There's some events that happen in the game when you're like, did that really happen? Wow, I can't believe it. And then you immediately put yourself in the character's shoes. And Suikoden 5, however, is a game that starts like really good. It hooks you up from the start, but then it goes low. It hooks you up at the beginning. I don't think I have any gameplay footage of that, but no, it's okay because you don't want to get spoiled. Go play the game by yourself. But you meet these 4 characters. The silent protagonist, which, by the way, I want to talk about the silent protagonist, is a character that, well, usually silent protagonists don't get character development, right? Or they get the development you decide for them according to their decisions throughout the story. Namely Persona, for example, or Growlanser. But a game like Suikoden 5, the protagonists in Suikoden don't really get a lot of development, but this one does. This particular protagonist gets a lot of character development, but you need to beat the game to understand why. All of these events he goes through, he even changes clothes 3 times in the game, so it has a lot of development. So, like I was saying, you meet these 4 characters at the beginning of Suikoden 5, and all of them with completely different personalities, a little bit cliche, I'll give you that, and one of them is pretty much fan service, Saya Leeds. She's overly sexualized, but Saya Leeds is one of the most interesting characters and intricate characters in the entire game. And you also get George, the badass, who was also in Suikoden 2 as a recruitable character. So my point is that you get this scene where they go into the town, they're suffering a lot, you get into a battle, you get the perspective, you go back to the how things are poorly done in this town, poorly run, and there's a lot of problems in there, and then you go back to the queen to report to the queen, to the queendom of Falina, and then all of a sudden, the queen acts as if it was nothing, as if these people deserve that. So immediately you get not exactly an antagonist, but these points of view clashing, So the first, I want to say 1 or 2 hours of Suikoden 5 are excellent. It hooks you up from the start. You're like, wow, so all of this is happening in this game? That's a great premise. But then the game tells you gotta visit all of these characters. And that's when it gets a little bit slowing. Not to say some of the gameplay in Suikoden 5, namely the battle you're seeing right now, that's why I'm showing this particular battle. I love this battle system. This is the war battle system with the war battles. The real-time strategy, as you can see, as you've been seeing. And it can be kind of slow to people because the characters, as you can see, they move a little bit slow, So, why do I call a game like this a masterpiece when it has some characteristics that, can make things slow for most people? In terms of story, what I was saying is that at the beginning of the game, after 2 hours, after all of those cutscenes, after you come back to town, the game tells you to explore, to talk to everyone, to go find your sister, to go to this room and then to this other room and then to explore the city and whatever. And it's like an entire hour, probably 2 more hours of boredom. It's boring. I'll admit it's freaking boring. And then you go to the tournament. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but things get interesting. Suikoden 5 really starts after the tournament. And that's like 6 hours into the game. So that's what I was trying to say, but when Suikoden 5 really starts, when it reaches that part of the game, that's when things go wow. And then when you finally start building your army, recruiting characters, it's just a game full of life. Most of the characters are very interesting, far more interesting than the ones in Suikoden 2, or 1 in my opinion, of course. And it's just a phenomenal game. It traps you. So by the end of the game, I was like, the first time I played Suikoden 5, I was like, man, this is an amazing game. I'm loving this. The only fault it has, the only flaw, is that it gets kind of slow, and that these battles you're seeing right now can be kind of slow for some people. I love this because I like real-time strategy battles like this. But I understand that this battle system may not be the best one. So that's what I wanted to talk about. That's what I want to show that sometimes a game may be a masterpiece, even though it has a couple of things that I don't think are for everyone, or that are kind of slow, or that are kind of boring. But the good thing about Suikoden V is that it has a phenomenal soundtrack. And I want to talk about the soundtrack right now. In video games, in JRPGs. A lot of people think it's important. You guys like your JRPG music, right? You guys love JRPG music. Most of you love JRPG music as much as I do, all right? But how important it is very important. Going back to the Suikoden V example I just gave, the town theme in Suikoden V is one of my all-time favorite town themes of all time. The first town, the Queendom of Falina. So while you're doing all that boring stuff in Suikoden V, at least you get to hear this amazing town theme. So sometimes the music does help the gameplay, and does help the narrative. That's how I see it. So the music might just come here to save the day. Okay, I'm going through this long ass dungeon and it's kind of boring, or this long ass whatever, these scenes. I'm reading a lot, or I gotta find something in this town, and it's gonna be it's gonna take me an hour to do everything I need to do in this town. But at least you're getting this amazing music. When you're in the overworld, Suikoden V has an amazing overworld theme, in my opinion, and it's just beautiful, the encounter rate is kind of high in Suikoden V, but you get this overworld theme. So that's my point. Thank you, CB Ross. Thanks a bunch, man. And then their story. Their story is something that has, in a JRPG, not in all video games, a video game can be a masterpiece with barely any story. Play Contra on the NES, a game that is widely regarded as a masterpiece. And the story in there is there's non-existent, man. You start the game. No presentation, no intro, no whatever. You just straight right up into shooting and killing people. So, several other video games are like that, But are there any JRPGs out there that have bad story or barely any story that can be considered a masterpiece? So what about you guys? Can you give me one example of a JRPG with not a lot of focus on the story, or where the story is kind of lame or is just kind of bad, and you think it's a masterpiece? Please, right now in the chat, give me one example. Because a long time ago, when I made a video a long time ago saying what was the most important aspect in a JRPG. And obviously I say that the story was the most important thing. We've seen several JRPGs where the story is kind of lame, but the gameplay is amazing, right? Are those games a masterpiece too? Okay, so Tales of Arise, I disagree, but I respect that. Okay, that will be a game, in your opinion, that will be a game with bad story. Super Mario RPG, okay, come on, man, that's a kid's game. Okay, Grandia 3, I like the story, but it's been criticized. I get it. Final Fantasy 1, that's a game that's being widely recognized as a masterpiece, and there's barely any story in there. The game Ogre Tactics, well, okay, that's a controversial opinion, I think the story in Tactics Ogre is the best thing in the game. Shadow Hearts 1 and 2 have bad stories, okay. Dragon Quest XI, the story was underwhelming, wow. And I'm supposed to be the guy who has controversial and unpopular opinions on the internet. Okay. Etrian Odyssey, that's a good example. There's barely any story in the gameplay. I don't like the gameplay, but a lot of people like it. Pokemon games, Final Fantasy V is kind of silly. Yeah, it's just weird choices, to be honest, I know, I'm the worst person to say that, I know, because I usually use weird choices for my videos, in some of my videos, I know. You're like, number 2 is that game? Like, what the hell, Eric? I know that. So I can't be too harsh on you, but some of your choices are kind of like, how many RPGs have you played, dude? Like, come on, I mean, no offense, but Shadow Hearts, Dragon Quest XI, Tales of Arise. Jesus. Okay. Star Ocean 3. Fine. Okay, fine, you know, enough examples. So, okay, would you, all of you people saying Shadow Hearts, Star Ocean 3, Dragon Quest 11, would you be able to say that game is a masterpiece? You know, the person right now saying Star Ocean 3. Do you think the game is a masterpiece? You don't like the story. Xenoblade and Xenosaga 1, 2, and 3. Someone is saying Xenosaga 1. Come on, guys, stop trolling. Xenosaga 1, 2, and 3, bad story. Get the fuck out of here, man. Jesus. So, you know, that's my point. Man, okay, well, this was a bad idea. Some of your examples. Let's just focus on the people who actually gave more reasonable examples. Oh my god, okay, you know. Persona 4 Golden. Yeah, that is an unpopular opinion. But anyway, you know, Chrono Cross, the story might be garbage to someone, you know. Xenogears, you know, someone just said Xenosaga, the story is bad. That's unbelievable, but someone exists that says Xenosaga. I think the guy is trolling, but if the guy isn't trolling, then there's someone who legitimately thinks Xenosaga story is bad. Let's respect that. But that's not the point. My point was not to have a discussion of what games have bad story and good story according to your opinion. My point, what I was trying to prove, is that how important is the story of a JRPG, and how maybe the story it is what might make us say that the game is a masterpiece. Thank you, Miami Sunrise. But take a game like Xenogears, for example. Let's just talk about Xenogears or Xenosaga. Somebody brought it up. So these are games that have been widely praised for their stories. But has Xenogears been widely praised, or Xenosaga 2, for their gameplay, considering Xenogears has a lot of problem? There's the Disc 2 situation, there's the horrible camera, there's the encounter rate, the bad dungeon design. And Xenosaga, I think everything is perfect, you know, but Xenosaga 1 and 2 have horrible difficulty spikes in some battles, and there's just too much dialogue. And there's a meme, right? Xenosaga has a meme. It used to have a meme back in the day where people were saying, oh, that's a game where you're practically watching a movie. That's not a game, that's a movie. I remember people were saying that about Xenosaga 1, 2, and 3. That there's just too much story. I'm okay with that. I like that, but I know some people don't. So is that a bad gameplay design? Like the one in Triangle Strategy, there's just too much freaking story. So what about that, right? While the story is amazing, will you be able to say the game is a masterpiece? Can you say Xenosaga 1 or Xenogears, despite its problems, is a masterpiece? You can say that if those technical issues in Xenogears are not an issue to you. If you don't mind them, that's okay. You know, I do mind them. That's why Xenogears, I think the story is a masterpiece, but the game itself, the whole creation as a whole, everything, story, gameplay, music, whatever, it may not be a masterpiece because it's not that enjoyable to play. And I'm the kind, you know, most of you play Xenogears right now, and well, let me see if I can show some gameplay of Xenogears. Let's see if I can show some gameplay. And well, lastly, we're gonna have to talk about, you know, Xenogears. Oh well, there's something here. I have a small gameplay here. You know, it's probably one of the most perfect examples because this is the freaking sewers, one of the worst dungeons in Xenogears. Okay. So there we go. There's more dialogue in there. Let's just move it forward. There we go. Just watch. Okay, make it. Let's go not full screen, but okay, like this. This is fine. I'll move to this side. More dialogue. Okay. Yeah, Xenogears has a lot of dialogue, but anyway, yeah. Characters are trying. You as a player are trying to go up. Look at this mess, man. How can you tell me? How can you tell me this is good design? I love this game, don't take me wrong, I freaking love this game, but this part right here, and you're not getting any random encounters in this part, thankfully. I'll let it play. So my point with Xenogears is usually a game that I use as an example, you know, to prove certain points on how Xenogears is a game that has been critically praised. Remember the Wikipedia's definition? You do, right? Critically praised so it's a masterpiece. So it's a game that's been considered as a masterpiece by many people out there. Is this what you will call a masterpiece? You get lost, you know, there's... Let me move it up a little more story. There we go. The camera in this game is atrocious, as you can clearly see with your own two eyes. The encounter rate, man. It's not that low, you know. Battles don't take that long to load. Chrono Cross takes far longer than this. Hey! Yeah, I love this battle system, by the way. Ha! But anyway, so in Xenogears, which is not in my opinion, because it has several gameplay design issues. The music in Xenogears, masterpiece. The characters, masterpiece. And the pacing, is dungeon design, the camera rate. Even back then, guys, I'm not talking about, oh, it's outdated, it is freaking outdated. Back then, these games were 5 years old. I played the game and I was like, man, it's annoying. That portion of the game is annoying. Hello? Oh. Sorry. This is what happens when you do things live. Sorry guys, sorry about that, you know. This is what happens when you do things live, or I really want to do this live. So, I'll repeat what I was saying. Sorry guys. So, I was saying that is Xenogears a masterpiece, considering it has all of these issues that I just mentioned, you know. I think it's a game with poor dungeon design. It's a game with, the battle system is great, the story is great, the music is great, the characters are great, the visuals are great, but it's a game with, I don't want to say terrible pacing, but it's not really that great of a pacing. It doesn't have the best pacing in JRPG history. It has great presentation, but it doesn't have the best pacing at all because of these gameplay issues, because of these design issues. This camera is bad. And it's kind of like excusable because, you know, if we're talking about the PlayStation 1 era, you know, a lot of games, it was just the start. It was the very start of the 3D graphics and whatever. So we gotta forgive these developers. But my point is that does every single box needs to check when you call a game a masterpiece? If it has problems like this? So to me, Xenogears, I love the heck out of this game. I love this game to pieces, man, but I don't think it's a masterpiece because it has gameplay issues. And it's a video game. And the most important aspect in a video game, the gameplay, the game itself, you know, how it plays, how it controls, how it feels. And in JRPGs, the story is the most important to me, but the second most important thing, which is almost just as important as the story, is the gameplay. A game may have the best story ever, but if the gameplay sucks, you know, you're not gonna play it, and nobody's gonna call it a masterpiece. Maybe a few people here and there, but most people are just not gonna call it a masterpiece. You know, that's the truth. So that's where I stand. You know, some games, someone's talking about Final Fantasy IX. I agree with that statement. Final Fantasy IX isn't perfect, but it is a masterpiece. I agree. I think of Final Fantasy IX as a masterpiece, even though it does have some issues. But the issues aren't as overwhelming as the ones in Xenogears, or the ones in Triangle Strategy. For some of you who I'm just reading more than half of the game. I'm just reading. That's a problem for some of you. It wasn't a problem for me, but I know it's a problem for some of you. So some of you, you know, who think that's a problem are probably not gonna call Triangle Strategy a masterpiece. So you see my point? So, you know, that's where I stand. That's where I stand. But so before this stream ends, I want to ask you guys something very important. What does presentation mean to you? So I've seen a lot of reviewers, you know, judging the presentation of a game. What the hell is that? I mean, I have I have an idea of what it is, and I'll share it. But I would like to understand a little bit more in order to help all of us understand a JRPG masterpiece. What is the presentation? If the presentation is bad, does that mean the game is not a masterpiece? Or is that something that's really bad? Like, oh, the presentation is bad, so the game's bad. I mean, what is a presentation? So someone's saying, with presentation, that means graphics and sound design. Okay, presentation allows me to decide if I would like to play the game or not in the first place. It's a weird category, exactly. So, style and aesthetic design. Presentation is like gameplay plus scenery plus OST. Okay, so some of your answers are a little bit different. Yeah, it is very, very subjective, right? So what the hell does presentation mean? Could be the packaging and the goodies, exactly. You see? So what is that? Whenever I see reviewers saying the presentation, and you see these reviewers and they explain the presentation, and then, okay, so the presentation means this, but then you see another YouTuber saying the presentation, and it's this, and that, and what? These two guys are saying something completely different. So anyway, yeah, that's Xenogears. Bad UI and gameplay can ruin a game totally. Presentation isn't everything in a game. Okay, the correct music, the corrected scene, good mechanics, overall impression. Presentation has so many meanings, exactly. So that's why when I said before, to conclude this video, what is a masterpiece to me, I'm not counting the presentation because I have no freaking clue what that is. There's no objective definition of that. It means whatever. It means how the game is presented to you. What most people mean is the visuals, probably, because it is how the game is presented to you. But, again, there's game with not so great visuals, but excellent gameplay. You're listening to the story of a game like that. Okay, this is Shin Megami Tensei 5. Doesn't have the best graphics ever, so does that mean the presentation is bad of Shin Megami Tensei 5? I think the gameplay is awesome, and the music and the story and whatever, the pacing. So it is very subjective. So let's conclude this stream by saying that, let me repeat what I said at the beginning of the video, that to me, there's just 7 things. Story, characters, gameplay. Gameplay, when I say gameplay, includes the dungeon design, the areas design, the encounter rate, the menus, the interface, the controls, the camera. That's part of the gameplay. The battle system, which is part of the gameplay, but I'm separating it. Battle system. Some games don't have the best gameplay, but they have phenomenal battle systems. Earthlock on the PS1 is not phenomenal, but it's a great battle system, although the gameplay in Earthlock is kind of boring. And the art style, which is different from the graphics. And finally, the music. So if those 7 things are great, all these boxes are checked, or like this, for me, that's a masterpiece. Last example that I want to give is that game I've been talking forever, and I know you guys are tired of seeing me talk about this game, but it's just one last example I won't show in the gameplay. Growlanser 5. Growlanser Heritage of War. That's a really obscure game with not the best reviews, doesn't have bad reviews, but it's kind of like mixed to average reviews, right? I'm the one on the internet calling it a masterpiece. Why? Because the music is amazing, because the graphics for a PlayStation 2 game are great, the art design, I love the character design, the world design, the mission design, how the game looks, the presentation is beautiful. The story is amazing in Growlanser 5. The characters are amazing in there. I love most of the characters in there. Very interesting, full of life, full of personality, full of great development. Not the overly cliched characters you see in a lot of JRPGs. I love the battle system in Growlanser, and the gameplay is great because it lets you freely... Growlanser, let's not forget, it's like a hybrid of an action RPG with a real-time strategy RPG. So it lets you move around freely, going from one location to the other. Sure, there's a lot of backtracking, but locations aren't far away at all. Going from point A to point B and vice versa doesn't take it takes like 5 minutes, or probably less, like 2 minutes or less. So that's why I call Growlanser 5 a weird, obscure as fuck game, a masterpiece. So whenever you see me calling a masterpiece. Now you understand what a JRPG masterpiece means to me. And I hope this video helped you guys understand what a JRPG masterpiece is to you or to somebody else. So because when you see, oh, that guy is saying this game is a masterpiece and I disagree, consider that maybe that guy, you know, is probably being biased, or that person, that reviewer is like me. Well, everything, all the important aspects in a game, in a JRPG, are excellent. And therefore, that's a masterpiece to them. So, that's it, guys. That's all. That's what a masterpiece means, in my opinion. As always. Kind of a little bit objective. I think I followed the rules described, or the definition described in Wikipedia. Okay? I think Growlanser, you know, speaking about, you know, the author's best work, I think Growlanser 5 is the best work of art in the entire series of the author, of the people who made the Growlanser games. That's the best one for me. So that's their masterpiece. So yeah, that's my definition, guys. And that's all. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. I also have a second channel and I'm uploading clips from my Q&As with gameplay footage and all that jazz, you know, edited gameplay footage, edited clips on my second channel. Yes, I have a second channel, so check the description for that, for the link to it. Subscribe to that second channel if you can and if you want to. And don't forget, I have books, written books, books that I wrote myself. I'm an author, in case you didn't know. And this is one of my books. This is my masterpiece, by the way. This is the best book that I've ever written, in my opinion. So linked to all of my books, printed or digital, in the description below. And I also have a Patreon page in case you want to support the channel, or occasionally I'll be doing reviews, live reviews. This is not one of them. This video right now will be public forever, but I may do some reviews, some video game reviews, some JRPG reviews every now and then, and those will be exclusive to members. What's a member? Just click the join button next to the subscribe button and you'll get an explanation. You get to watch these live reviews after the live stream is over. Alright guys, so yeah, all of that. Hell of an advertisement from my behalf. That's all guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.